The evolution of education in America over the last couple of centuries has seen dramatic changes. Schools went from being only open to the wealthy upper class who paid for their sons to attend private schools, to the opening of public schools funded by taxes. Eventually, a small percent of girls could attend school, but only to learn how to read, as it was seen as important to understand the Bible. Education for girls today is still heavily stacked against them, with extended gender biases preventing them from performing as academically as well as men. These biases are incredibly harmful because it is a lasting generational issue that sees reduced amounts of women attending college and entering the workforce. When looking at statistical evidence, girls are more likely to be ignored in the classroom, less likely to be called on when a question arises, and are graded lower than boys with homework assignments. Something as trivial as the tone of your voice and your personality goes into how successful you are in the educational industry, and how some educators will prefer someone with a lower voice, as it reflects being more serious, which will almost always be a male. Personality as well goes into it, as men tend to be louder and physically take up more room, which makes for a more interesting classroom setting. These implicit gender biases affect female students because it can destroy the way they view other aspects of life, including when it comes to look for a job. My fourth source is a UConn student's thesis about gender bias and how that affects educational outcomes in females. The thesis connects the idea of gender inequality having a negative effect on educational outcomes, which in turn will have a negative effect on economic growth. It explores how damaging gender biases can be to other aspects of life. It goes on to explain how girls experiencing gender bias in the classroom can interpret society as being unequal, which would in turn make them think they wouldn't have as many opportunities in life as boys, which would lower performance and motivation rates while in school. The thesis connects the bigger picture of gender bias to every individual's social and economic aspect. This led to further theorizing about other biases that are included in the classroom, which is where racial biases come into play. My third source describes statistically the unconscious bias educators take out on students today. 82.7% of Asian students and 78.4% of white students graduated high school on time, whereas the same was true for only 57.6% of Hispanic students, 57% of Black students, and 53.9% of American Indian students. Gender and racial biases go hand in hand when looking at negative unconscious decisions being made in a classroom and how the educational system in America was created excluding both girls and people of color at first, and how this still affects the classroom today. My research segued into different branches of theorizing when thinking about students' performance in the classroom and unconscious decisions that go into academic performance. This brought me to researching about the Pygmalion effect. The Pygmalion effect, invented by Robert Rosenthal in the 1960s, was an experiment conducted in the classroom to judge teachers' expectations and academic performances by students.
In an experiment conducted at an elementary school like this one, psychologist Robert Rosenthal and school principal Lenore Jacobson took the Pygmalion effect one step further.
What we wanted to show was the extent to which teachers' expectations could actually affect pupils' intellectual performance, for example, their IQ scores. So what we did was we tested everybody in a school with a test that pretended to be a test that would predict academic blooming, so-called Harvard test of inflected acquisition, and allegedly on the basis of that test, but not really, we gave each of the teachers in the school the names of a handful of children in her classroom that would get smart in the academic year ahead. These kids' names were taken out of a hat. We chose them by means of a table of random numbers. The children themselves did not know in any direct way that teachers were holding certain expectations for them. Teachers were told not to tell the kids, and of course we didn't tell the children either. So the children never knew.
6 times something that's close to 32. Good. 6 times 5.
And then when we tested the children a year later, we found that those kids who'd been alleged to their teachers to be showing or going to show intellectual gains, in fact showed greater intellectual gains than did the children of whom we'd said nothing in particular. So the kids actually got smarter when they were expected to get smarter by their teachers.